Millionaire forces his rebellious daughter to marry the gardener, but he never expected this ending. There was nothing poetic about the way Evelyn Walker crashed her Porsche into the vineyard fence at 3:27 a.m. The headlights still flickered, half buried in the vines her family spent decades perfecting. But Evelyn didn't care. She staggered out barefoot, mascara running, her mother's diamond bracelet clinking loosely on her wrist, her only inheritance worth wearing. The moon bathed her in silver, but her soul was soaked in shadows. This was her rebellion, loud and reckless. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Inside the mansion, Richard Walker's phone rang once. He already knew. The butler didn't even need to say her name. Richard, a man forged in the iron of business empires, tightened his grip on the glass of bourbon. "Bring her home," he ordered calmly, though every word was a clenched fist. His daughter was unraveling before his eyes, and he was too proud or too broken to say it out loud. 6 months earlier, Evelyn's mother, Meredith, had died. In her sleep, a quiet death for a woman who once lit up every room like a chandelier. Evelyn, her only child, had sat next to the hospice bed for 14 nights, waiting for a miracle that never came. Meredith was her softness, her warmth, her protector from Richard's cold empire. And when she left, she took Evelyn's world with her. Silence settled in Evelyn like rot. Richard had mourned too, but differently. He buried himself in profit margins, acquisitions, and calendar briefings. But he watched Evelyn drift further with every party, every paparazzi shot, every headline that screamed, "Winemaker's heiress in wild spiral." He saw his dynasty crumbling not from outside threats, but from the very girl meant to inherit it. And that he could not allow. When Evelyn was dragged home, still reeking of whiskey and midnight mistakes, Richard didn't yell. He simply stared at her, eyes empty, then handed her a contract. She barely skimmed it. "What is this?" she asked, defiant. "Your salvation," he replied, "or your exile." Evelyn laughed, but the laughter died when she saw Noah Carter's name written under hers. Noah was the vineyard's gardener, a quiet, solitary man with sun-baked skin and calloused hands. He'd worked the land longer than Evelyn could remember, always in the background, like an old tree, necessary but unnoticed. She hadn't spoken more than 5 words to him in 10 years, and now her father wanted them married. "You're insane," she whispered. Richard didn't blink. "It's not a punishment," he said. "It's your only way back." He made it simple. Marry Noah, stay on the estate and receive her full inheritance, or walk away with nothing but her last name. Evelyn threw the paper across the room. "You're sick," she spat, but she wasn't ready to be broke. Not yet. That night, Evelyn sat alone in the vineyard, near the crushed fence. She lit a cigarette with trembling fingers, staring at the stars as if they owed her answers. She thought of Meredith. What would she say? Would she have protected her? Fought? For her freedom? Or was this Evelyn's price for running away from grief? Noah, meanwhile, didn't ask for this. He had a sister, Anna, who couldn't walk, who needed expensive treatments insurance wouldn't cover. When Richard made the offer, Noah's gut twisted. It felt like betrayal. Of Evelyn, of his own dignity. But Anna came first. Always had. Always would. He agreed with one condition. Evelyn had to say yes. Evelyn signed the contract with shaking hands 2 days later. Not because she wanted to, not even because she believed she had a choice, but because losing her mother had already taken so much. And Richard was ready to take the rest. She refused to let him win that easily. If this was her prison, she'd decorate the bars herself. The wedding was silent. No guests, no champagne, just ink and tension. Noah wore his cleanest shirt. Evelyn wore contempt. They said, "I do," like 2 strangers reading a script. And when the notary left, Evelyn went to her old room, slammed the door, and cried for a woman who could no longer defend her. Noah moved into the guest house. Evelyn stayed in the main house. They didn't see each other for weeks. She spent her days pretending she was still free, still in control. Parties, friends, meaningless kisses. But at night, the silence screamed louder. Noah, on the other hand, tended the roses, because some things still deserved to bloom. But fate, cruel and poetic, doesn't let stories stay quiet forever. On a stormy evening, when thunder growled like judgment, Evelyn wandered into the garden, drunk and barefoot. Her heel snapped. She fell, right into Noah's arms. For a moment, just a second, she didn't push him away. Their eyes locked. He smelled of rain and earth, real, grounded. She pulled back. "Don't think this means anything," she hissed. Noah didn't answer. He just nodded and walked away, disappearing into the fog. But that night, Evelyn lay awake, haunted not by her father or her choices, but by the stillness in Noah's eyes, the kind that saw her, the kind that forgave her without words. Evelyn began counting her days like a prisoner. 1 glass of wine, 2 pills for sleep, 3 ignored calls from Richard. The guest wing of the estate had become her fortress, its silence only broken by the hum of distant sprinklers and the occasional bird that didn't know better than to sing near tragedy. She avoided the garden, she avoided Noah, she avoided mirrors. Every reflection reminded her of the choices she didn't make. Noah, on the other hand, had his own routine. He rose at dawn, stretched quietly, and walked barefoot on the dew-covered earth. The vines didn't care about marriage contracts or wounded heiresses. They grew because someone loved them consistently. That was Noah, the invisible presence, the man who whispered to the soil when no one was listening. He didn't expect gratitude, only growth. The first weeks passed in complete silence. They didn't share meals, didn't share words, not even glances. Evelyn lived like a ghost, drifting through the halls in silk robes, her eyes hollow. Noah worked like a monk, hands in the dirt, sweat in his collar, thoughts buried. But the house, the land, it was too alive to let silence reign forever. Something had to shift. One evening, Evelyn wandered into the kitchen at midnight. Noah was there, washing his hands. He didn't flinch when she entered, just nodded once. She opened the fridge, took a bottle of white wine, and paused. "You always here?" she asked. Her voice was low, uninterested. "Just feeding the sourdough," he replied. She blinked. "You bake?" "Only bread," he said. "It stays quiet." That was their first conversation, if it could be called that. But it left an echo. Evelyn found herself awake later that night, thinking not about the wine or the silence, but about the sourdough. Something so ordinary, so human. The next morning, she watched him from the upstairs window. He trimmed the roses with a tenderness that confused her. Who was this man? She started noticing more, the way he hummed when pruning, how he knelt beside plants like he was praying, the quiet way he fed a stray cat that lived near the greenhouse. None of it made sense. He was supposed to be her punishment, her jailer. And yet, he was just kind. It annoyed her. Kindness always did. One rainy afternoon, Evelyn found herself on the old wooden swing behind the estate. It was their mother's favorite spot, now aged and creaking. She wasn't sure why she was there. Maybe to remember, maybe to forget. Noah passed by carrying tools. "Swing still holds," he said, not slowing down. "Barely," she replied. "Like me." He stopped for a second, looked back, but didn't speak. The rain kept falling. That night, Evelyn dreamed of her mother, laughing, barefoot, chasing her through the vines. When she woke, her pillow was wet. She told herself it was sweat, but deep down she knew it wasn't. She missed being someone's daughter, someone's joy. Now she was only a name, a burden, a wife in a paper marriage. Noah didn't ask questions, not even when she stopped going out, not when she refused Richard's calls. He just let her be. Evelyn had never known freedom like that. Her whole life was permission, expectation, performance. But Noah didn't demand anything, and that was disarming. It made her feel more seen than all the parties she'd ever attended. One morning, Evelyn wandered into the garden barefoot. It was accidental, or so she told herself. Noah was tending to a bed of lavender. He looked up, nodded, then went back to work. She stood there for a minute, then blurted out, "How do you do it?" He looked at her, puzzled. "Do what?" "Stay quiet, stay kind." His answer was simple. Loud people never hear themselves. She didn't reply, just walked away, but the words lingered. Evelyn started spending more time near the garden. Not with him, never with him, but near. Sometimes with a book she didn't read, sometimes with a glass of wine she didn't drink. Watching, listening, waiting for a sign she didn't know she wanted. Noah never pushed, never intruded. But one day he left a flower on the porch, a single dahlia wrapped in a napkin. No note, no explanation. Evelyn stared at it for hours. It wasn't a romantic gesture. Not quite. It was acknowledgement. Proof that someone noticed her even when she was silent. And that terrified her. She told herself not to feel anything. This wasn't real. This wasn't love. It was proximity, circumstance, desperation. But every time she looked at Noah now, she saw the cracks in her armor. And in his eyes, still. Waters, still stormy, she saw herself reflected back, not as the reckless heiress, but as a woman still capable of changing. The letter arrived sealed with Richard's insignia, gold ink on ivory parchment, as if elegance could hide manipulation. Evelyn found it on the kitchen counter, untouched, as though Noah refused to be the messenger. She stared at it. Pulse, quickening. It wasn't the letter itself that scared her. It was what it might represent. Control. Again. Slowly, she unfolded it, the paper trembling in her hands. Family gathering, Sunday, attendance expected. She didn't want to go. The idea of sitting in that dining room under chandeliers that watched like eyes, surrounded by strangers, in tailored masks, it was suffocating. But she also knew Richard didn't ask. He commanded. She hadn't seen him in weeks, hadn't heard his voice in longer. Still, his presence loomed in her life like storm clouds waiting to pour. She sighed, crumpled the invitation, and left it on the counter. Noah noticed, but didn't ask. He simply continued peeling apples, the rhythmic motion of the knife strangely soothing. Evelyn paced behind him. "You ever say no to him?" she finally asked. Noah didn't look up. "I don't talk to him." She tilted her head. "He pays you." "Doesn't mean I owe him conversation," Noah replied calmly. Evelyn sat down. That was unexpected. Sunday came too soon. Evelyn wore a black dress, not out of mourning, but defiance. She walked into the estate as if into a battlefield. Richard stood at the head of the table, flanked by lawyers and board members. He smiled, a gesture rehearsed. "You look radiant," he said. Evelyn ignored him. She took her seat without a word, her silence louder than rebellion. The lunch. Dragged. Toasts. Updates. Business proposals veiled as small talk. But beneath it all, Richard was watching her, measuring, calculating. When dessert was served, he finally leaned in. "How is Noah?" he asked, too casual. Evelyn's fork paused. "Mid-air. Alive," she answered. Richard chuckled. "He's served his purpose well, hasn't he?" Her blood ran cold. "What purpose?" He leaned closer, voice low. "To ground you, to cleanse you, and now perhaps to be dismissed." Evelyn froze. Her heart beat so loud she couldn't hear the rest of the table. Dismissed, like a servant, like a lesson completed. Richard saw her hesitation and pressed further. "We both know this phase can end. I've arranged something more suitable." That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat in the guesthouse living room, lights off, staring at the fireless fireplace. Noah entered quietly, dropped his gloves, and paused. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't respond right away, then softly, "My father thinks you're temporary." Noah exhaled. "I know." She turned to him, her eyes glossy. "Why didn't you tell me?" He sat across from her, not too close. "Because I didn't want to make you choose." "Choose what?" she whispered. "Between what you feel and what you fear." That broke her. She stood, restless, tears welling. "This isn't fair, Noah. I didn't ask for any of this." He nodded. "Neither did I." And for the first time, their truths aligned in silence. Flashback. Evelyn. As a child, running barefoot through the vineyard, Meredith chasing her with a basket of peaches. Laughter filled the air. "Someday this will be yours," Meredith said, kneeling beside her. "Not the land, the peace it gives." But peace had vanished with Meredith's final breath. Now all that remained was a battlefield dressed in grapes. Back in the present, Evelyn whispered, "He wants me to remarry, to a partner in his newest merger." Noah looked away. That hurt more than she expected. "And what do you want?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't know. I didn't want you. Then I didn't hate you. Then I needed you, and now I don't know who I am anymore." Noah rose slowly, stepped toward her. "Maybe you're just someone figuring it out." His voice was calm, sure. "And maybe that's okay." She looked up, for once not with arrogance or bitterness, but with raw, aching vulnerability. "If I leave him, really leave him, I lose everything." Noah met her gaze. "Not everything, just what he controls." The words echoed long after he left the room. Evelyn stood alone, heart racing. That night she didn't return to the main estate. Instead, she stayed in the guest house, curled up on the couch, staring at the moon. For the first time in months, she didn't dream of drowning. She dreamed of soil, of roots, of something finally starting to grow. 3 days passed without a word between them. Not because they fought, but because they were both afraid of what the next word might mean. Evelyn spent her hours on the hill above the vineyard, the one with the old oak tree where Meredith used to sketch. She hadn't been there in years, but now it called to her like a forgotten song. She sat for hours, not thinking, just breathing. Noah, meanwhile, buried himself in the vineyard. Harvest season was creeping closer. The vines needed pruning. The soil needed turning. It was the kind of work that demanded presence. And presence kept him sane. But even with his hands in the earth, his mind wandered, to Evelyn, to her silence, to the ache in his chest he refused to name. That evening, Evelyn stood in the garden as the sun dipped behind the hills. She was barefoot again, her black dress fluttering. Noah didn't see her at first. He was focused on a broken trellis. She watched him in silence, the way his body moved with the rhythm of the land. For the first time, she realized he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply existed, fully, authentically. "I can't stay here," she said suddenly. Noah turned, surprised. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "Not like this. I feel like a shadow inside someone else's life." He put down his tools, wiped his hands. "Then let's leave," he said. She blinked. "What?" "You and me," he added. "Just go, start over." It was madness, impulsive, romantic in the worst way, but her heart jumped at the thought. "You'd leave this?" she asked, gesturing to the vineyard, the house, the roots he'd planted. "For what? A runaway bride?" Noah stepped closer. "For a woman I've watched bury herself every day since the wedding, and who, for a moment, looked like she wanted to live again." Evelyn turned away. It was too much, too raw. "I can't promise I'll be different," she whispered. "I still don't know how to love someone without losing myself." Noah paused. Then don't love me, just be with me. And if that's not enough, we walk away when it's time. But at least we'll be walking free. The wind stirred around them. Evelyn looked up at the sky, cloudy and wide. She remembered how Meredith used to say that some storms come to wash things clean. Maybe this was hers. "Okay," she said. One word, but it felt like a bridge between two cliffs that had waited a lifetime to connect. They didn't pack much. Just enough for a few days. Noah left a note with the foreman. Evelyn didn't tell Richard. She couldn't, not yet. They drove out in Noah's rusted pickup, the vineyard disappearing in the rear view like a past life. No destination, no plan, just escape, just breath. The first night, they stayed at a roadside inn. The room smelled of cedar and rain. Evelyn stared at the ceiling. Noah slept on the couch. Not from obligation, but respect. And something deeper. They didn't speak much. But for the first time, silence wasn't a war. It was peace. In the morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of birds. Real birds, not curated estate sounds. She stepped outside barefoot, the gravel biting. But it felt good. Real. Noah handed her a coffee, no words needed. They sat on the porch, watching fog roll over the hills. She reached for his hand gently. "Thank you," she said. For what? She wasn't sure. But it felt right. Later that day, they found a farmer's market, bought fresh bread, tomatoes, and peaches. Evelyn held one up, remembering her mother's laugh. "Meredith loved peaches," she murmured. Noah smiled. "Tell me about her." And she did. For the first time since her death, Evelyn spoke without choking. The memories didn't hurt, they healed. They kept driving, found an abandoned cottage by a lake, cleaned it up, stayed there, days blurred. They cooked together, read books, walked, under starlight. And slowly, Evelyn stopped checking her phone. She stopped thinking about the estate, about Richard, about expectations. She began to write again, letters, sketches, journal entries that sounded like beginnings, but even paradise carries shadows. One evening, a storm rolled in. Thunder crashed like a warning. Evelyn stood at the lake's edge, wind in her hair. "It's too perfect," she said. Noah came up beside her. "You're waiting for it to break?" She nodded. "Everything. The good in my life disappears." He touched her arm. "Then let's make something that stays, even if we have to fight for it." And just like that, Evelyn felt the first real tears in months. Not of grief, but of hope. They stayed in the lakeside cottage for 11 days, long enough to forget. The world, short enough to know it wasn't real. Evelyn felt herself slowly thawing, piece by piece, under Noah's quiet presence. He never rushed her, never demanded more than she could give, and that, more than anything, made her want to give him everything. One morning she woke before him, watched his chest rise and fall in rhythm with the breeze brushing through the open window. For a moment, she imagined a life without wealth, without legacy, just mornings like this, wrapped in silence and breath. It felt possible, dangerous but possible. And yet, something inside her stirred uneasily. She found her phone buried deep in her bag, dozens of missed calls, 3 voicemails from Richard, 2 from his lawyer, a single text from an unknown number. "They're selling the estate." Her heart stopped. Evelyn sat frozen, reading the message again and again. Selling, without her, without consent. Panic set in like wildfire. Noah woke to find her pacing. She didn't speak, just handed him the phone. He read, jaw tightening. "You think it's real?" he asked. "It's Richard," she replied. "It's always real." Her breath was shallow. "He thinks I'm done, that I've forfeited everything. He wants to erase me from the family." "Name." Noah didn't answer. He didn't need to. They packed that afternoon. The air between them felt heavier now, charged with urgency. Evelyn didn't want to leave the cottage. It had become sacred, a liminal space where she could be more than her pain. But she couldn't abandon the vineyard, not yet, not without a fight. "I have to face him," she said. Noah simply nodded. They arrived back at the estate just after midnight. Everything looked the same, but Evelyn felt different, stronger, sharper. She walked through the grand iron gates like a soldier reclaiming a lost kingdom. The lights were on. Richard was waiting. Of course he was. Men like him don't sleep, they wait. He stood by the fireplace, drink in hand. "So the prodigal daughter returns," he said with a smirk. Evelyn didn't flinch. "Cut the theatrics. Are you selling it?" Richard swirled his glass. "I'm protecting it. You abandoned it, left with the gardener, no less." She stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare twist this. You forced me into that marriage, and now that it no longer serves your plan, you throw me out?" Richard's smile faded. "You had a role to play. You refused." His voice was like cold steel. "This estate, this name, requires sacrifice." Evelyn's voice cracked but held firm. "Mother didn't build this with sacrifice. She built it with love." Richard's hand trembled just slightly. "And where did that get her?" he snapped. Silence fell, thick, brutal. Evelyn stepped closer. "You never mourned her. You buried her next to a vineyard report." Richard looked away. That was his tell. She'd struck something deep. "Selling. The estate won't bring you peace," she whispered. "It'll only prove you failed to control the one thing that mattered, me." Noah entered quietly, stood at the door. He didn't speak, just stood tall, like a presence Evelyn could lean on without words. Richard noticed. "So this is your revolution," he sneered. "A man who plays with dirt." Evelyn smiled for the first time. "No, this is my freedom, and you can't buy it, sell it, or threaten it." Richard walked past her, slow and deliberate. "The board meets in 4 days. If you want to save your share, show up, but do it alone." Evelyn didn't blink. "I won't hide him anymore." "Then you lose," he said. "Maybe," she replied, "but I lose on my own terms." That night, Evelyn sat beside the fireplace in the guest house. Noah handed her a cup of tea. "Do you regret coming back?" he asked. She shook her head. "I regret waiting so long." He leaned back, silent. Then finally, "I'll stand with you, but if you ask me to walk away, I will, for your sake." She looked at him, eyes steady. "Don't go!" In the distance, thunder rumbled. Not a storm yet, but a promise. The boardroom hadn't changed. Same long oak table, same heavy curtains choking out the sunlight. But Evelyn had. She stood at the head of the room like a stranger, returning to her childhood bedroom. Nothing fit anymore, and everything reeked of someone else's expectations. 12 pairs of eyes stared at her, each one judging, weighing, waiting. Richard sat at the far end, calm as a chess master. She wore a navy blue suit, not because it was fashionable, but because it made her feel armored. No jewelry, no makeup, just her presence, sharpened by silence and resolve. "I'm here to contest the sale," she said without greeting. The legal counsel, an old man with breath like dust, cleared his throat. "You abandoned your seat, Ms. Walker. The bylaws are clear." Evelyn smirked. "Show me the clause that says grief has an expiration date." A murmur rippled through the room. Richard didn't move. "Let's not turn this into theatre," he said, voice smooth as aged wine. Evelyn turned to him. "No, let's finally admit this was never about the vineyard. This was about control, about punishing me for not being the heir you wanted." Someone shifted uncomfortably in their chair. "Your absence cost us," another board member said. Shareholders grew nervous. Richard stepped in to protect the brand. Evelyn took a deep breath. "You mean he erased me to stabilize your stocks? I'm not a liability, I'm legacy, and Meredith Walker's vision didn't die with her. Her voice was clear, confident. The room listened. Richard finally stood, walked slowly around the table. "You left," he said. "You ran away with a man who belongs to the soil, while we held this place together." Evelyn's lips curled. "And yet I returned stronger than ever, not in spite of him, because of him." Gasps, a few glances exchanged. Richard's jaw tightened. "This estate doesn't need a princess," he said coldly. "It needs a leader." Evelyn didn't flinch. "Then stop crowning yourself king." She pulled out a folder, placed it on the table. "Here's a proposal to restructure. I retain co-ownership, but create a new branch focused on sustainable harvest and community programs in Meredith's name." The room shifted again. Less hostility now, more curiosity. The proposal was smart, visionary. It offered evolution without severing tradition. One board member, a woman in her 60s, tapped her pen thoughtfully. "This could work," she said. Richard turned sharply. "It's sentimental." Evelyn met his eyes. "It's real, which is more than I can say for the mask you've worn since she died." He stepped forward, eyes narrow. "You think this is about her?" "Everything's about her," Evelyn shot back. "She was the heart. You were the spine. Without her, this place became a corpse." The room fell silent. Even Richard felt the sting. He looked away. "You want the board's vote?" he muttered. "Fine." One by one, the members voted. 6 in favor of Evelyn's proposal, 4 against, 1 abstained. Richard waited until last. Everyone watched. He stood for a long moment, then said quietly, "Approved." Evelyn didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just exhaled, like letting go of a weight she'd carried for too long. As people filed out, murmuring and speculating, Richard stayed behind. Evelyn approached him slowly. "I didn't win," she said. "I just stopped losing." He looked at her, really looked, for the first time in years. "You sound like her." Evelyn swallowed hard. "Maybe I'm finally becoming her." He nodded, barely, then turned his back and walked away, slower than usual. Maybe the armor was cracking. Maybe not. But for the first time, Evelyn didn't need his validation. She had her own roots now. Outside, Noah waited beside the truck, arms folded, eyes scanning the door. When she stepped out, he didn't speak, just opened the passenger door. She climbed in, looked at him. "It's done," she said. He nodded. "And now?" She reached for his hand. "Now we plant something new." In the distance, the vineyard swayed gently in the wind, as if bowing to a queen it had finally learned to recognize. The vineyard was quiet again, not the stillness of tension, but of transition. Evelyn walked between the rows barefoot, toes sinking into warm soil. She carried a sketch pad under one arm, a pencil tucked behind her ear. She wasn't drawing yet, just observing. She wanted to feel like she belonged to this land, not just inherited it. Noah watched her from a distance, eyes filled with something between pride and restraint. Back at the guest house, Rosa, the housekeeper, who'd helped raise Evelyn, had returned to tend to the kitchen. She hummed softly as she baked bread, the scent drifting into the garden. Evelyn paused near the open window, letting the aroma wrap around her like memory. "Your mother loved impeach preserves," Rosa said, not looking up. "She used to spread it on fresh bread at sunset." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I remember. Noah worked on rebuilding the west greenhouse, its beams rotted from years of neglect. Evelyn joined him one afternoon, holding the ladder steady as he hammered. "You're not afraid of splinters?" he teased. "After everything I've survived," she said, smirking, "splinters feel like affection." They both laughed. It felt easy now, like they were finally standing on something solid. One evening, Evelyn found a box of Meredith's journals, hidden in the library, dusty, forgotten, almost sacred. She stayed up all night reading. Her mother had written about Noah once, years ago when he first arrived as a teenager. He listens more than he speaks. I think he understands roots better than most grown men." Evelyn smiled, then cried. The next morning, she placed the journal on Noah's workbench. "She saw you," she whispered. He looked confused until he opened it. His hands trembled slightly. "I didn't know she noticed me," he murmured. "She noticed everyone." Evelyn replied. That was her power and her curse. The lake cottage still haunted Evelyn's dreams. She missed its quiet, missed the woman she became there. So one weekend, they returned, just the two of them. The air smelled like pine and memory. They didn't speak much, didn't need to. Noah fished. Evelyn painted the lake. It was the closest thing to peace either of them had felt in years. On the second night by the fire, Evelyn asked, "What scares you most?" Noah thought for a long time. "Forgetting who I was before all this," he said. "And you?" She stared into the flames. "Becoming who I was meant to be. Too late." He took her hand quietly. "You're not late. You're right on time." They kissed for the first time that night, not with urgency, but with recognition. It wasn't lust or relief. It was the soft collapse of two people who had held up too much for too long. When morning came, nothing was said, but everything had changed. They had crossed a line neither of them wanted to retreat from. Back at the estate, Evelyn stood by Meredith's grave. She carried a single vine cutting and planted it beside the tombstone. "I'm sorry I ran," she whispered, "but I think I found something you'd be proud of, or someone." She touched the soil gently, as if asking permission. The wind responded, rustling the leaves above. Richard watched from the mansion window, alone, for once without a glass in hand. He didn't interrupt, didn't call out, just watched. His empire had shifted, his daughter had outgrown his control, and though pride wasn't easy for him, loss was easier to recognize, and for the first time he felt both in equal measure. Later that night, Evelyn stood with Noah on the porch of the guest house. "Do you think this can last?" she asked. He didn't rush the answer. "Things that grow slow," he said, "take deeper root." She leaned against him. "Then let's be slow," he smiled. "We already are." The next day, Evelyn called a town meeting at the vineyard. She announced the Meredith Walker Foundation, an initiative focused on education, land preservation, and fair labor for vineyard workers. The crowd applauded, but more than that, they believed. Because this wasn't just a rebranding, it was rebirth. Noah stood in the back, quiet as always, until Evelyn pulled him beside her. "None of this happens without him," she told the crowd. "He taught me that growth requires patience, and that love, like vines, needs space to breathe." Noah flushed but didn't move. He was exactly where he was meant to be. That night, as rain gently kissed the windows, Evelyn whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore." Noah turned to her in the dark. "Good," he said, "because the next chapter's going to be wild." And she smiled, already ready for it. The letter arrived in a black envelope. No return address, no insignia, just Evelyn's name, written in ink that bled like old wounds. Rosa found it tucked under the front gate early that morning. "Strange delivery," she muttered, handing it to Evelyn. Evelyn opened it slowly, already knowing it wasn't good. The words inside felt like a blade. "You don't know what your mother gave up for this land." She sat in the study for hours, staring at the letter. Noah passed by, paused in the doorway. "Something wrong?" he asked. Evelyn didn't speak, just handed him the paper. He read it once, twice. "Anonymous?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. "But it feels familiar." She wasn't paranoid. She knew her mother had secrets. Everyone in power does. They began digging. Evelyn pulled out old estate records, journals, property deeds. Noah contacted a retired vineyard worker who once served as Meredith's assistant. Slowly, a story began to unravel, one that Richard never told. Decades ago, before the vineyard became a symbol of prestige, it was in danger of collapse. Financial ruin loomed. Meredith had made a deal. A silent one. She sold part of her stake to a mysterious partner, a man named Silas Dorn, a private financier known for backing legacies and destroying them. The contract had been buried, hidden in the estate archives. Evelyn found it sealed in a drawer labeled Walker Legacy Inactive. But the clause was still valid. If the family heir failed to uphold the contract, Dorn's descendants had claim to the land. Evelyn confronted Richard that night. "You hid this from me," she said, tossing the file onto his desk. He didn't deny it, just stared at the folder like a ghost he'd hoped was buried. "Your mother begged me to," he finally said. "She didn't want you to inherit her shame." Evelyn's voice cracked. "She saved this place, but she sold herself to do it." Richard looked older than ever. "We all make sacrifices for legacy," he whispered. "She made hers, I made mine, and now it's your turn." Evelyn slammed her hand on the table. "No, I won't inherit chains dressed as roots. I'm not saving a name. I'm saving what it could have been." Her voice echoed in the empty office. That night Evelyn couldn't sleep. She wandered the vineyard until she reached the old chapel near the west field, now a ruin. She remembered Meredith bringing her there as a child. "This is where your name becomes a vow," her mother had said. Evelyn never understood that until now. Now, every vine felt like a whisper of compromise. Noah found her at sunrise, sitting on the chapel steps. "I thought I could change everything," she said. "Turns out I'm just a placeholder in someone else's bargain." He sat beside her. "Then burn the contract," he said. "Start your own legacy, not theirs." She looked at him, hope flickering. "How?" "By making it about people, not names." So that's what she did. Evelyn organized a town forum, invited local workers, historians, farmers. She opened the estate books, exposed the deal, exposed herself. "This land was saved by a woman who never got credit," she said. "Now it belongs to more than just the Walkers. It belongs to the hands that built it." The crowd erupted in support, and among them a figure stood quietly. Silas, Dorn's grandson, Malcolm. He approached Evelyn after the forum, tall, lean, expression unreadable. "You could have denied it," he said, "buried the deal again." Evelyn stood tall. "But then I'd be my father, and I'm not." Malcolm studied her. "I don't want your land. I want a seat at your table." She hesitated, then extended her hand, as a partner, not a predator. Back at the guest house, Evelyn poured 2 glasses of wine. Noah raised an eyebrow. "Celebration," she nodded, "for breaking bloodlines." He smiled. "Sounds like vintage Rebellion." They clinked glasses. The wine tasted different, fuller, earned. Later that night, Evelyn wrote her mother a letter she'd never send. She placed it in the roots of the vine they planted by Meredith's grave. "You gave everything," she whispered. "Now it's time I give it back." The wind stirred, and Evelyn felt for the first time that she had truly reclaimed her story. It began with smoke, just a faint ribbon curling over the eastern hill at dawn. Noah was the first to see it. He dropped the watering can mid-row and ran. Evelyn was in the tasting room preparing for a charity event when he burst through, the doors panting. "The vines," he said, "they're burning." She didn't even grab her shoes, just ran. The east field was ablaze, a wall of fire climbing through the dry leaves and wooden trellises like it had been waiting. Workers were already forming. Lines with hoses, shovels, anything they could grab. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She joined them, eyes stinging, hands blackened. It wasn't panic. It was war. This land had taken everything from her. She wouldn't let it take more. Fire trucks, Arrived, sirens piercing the early quiet. By noon, the flames were contained, but the damage was done. 2 acres of heritage vines were ash. A legacy turned to soot. Evelyn stood in the smoke, coughing, fists clenched. "This wasn't natural," she said. Noah nodded. "I smelled kerosene." The implications settled between them. Someone had done this on purpose. That night the town buzzed with rumors: insurance fraud, rivals, sabotage. Evelyn gathered her team, her voice hoarse but clear. "I want names," she said. "I want facts, and I want them fast." Noah placed a hand on her shoulder. "They wanted fear," he said. "Let's give them fireproof roots instead." She nodded. She wouldn't be shaken. The investigation started with security footage. One camera near the field had caught movement, a shadow, a hood, a gas can. But the image was too grainy, not enough for police. Evelyn watched the loop over and over, memorizing the posture, the stride. There was something familiar about the way the figure moved, and that scared her more than the fire. 3 nights later, she got a call. Malcolm Dawn. "I think you're being watched," he said. Evelyn frowned. "By who?" "Someone who thinks you stole their power." Evelyn hung up and stared out the window. Richard. It was the only name her mind could produce. But would he really go that far? And if not him, who? The next day, Rosa found a burnt matchbox on the porch, Vineyard branded, a cruel joke. Evelyn tucked it in her pocket and didn't say a word. She couldn't, not yet. She needed proof. Meanwhile, the vineyard launched a fundraiser for the workers displaced by the fire. The community rallied. Love grew louder than arson. Noah stayed close, quieter than usual. He sensed something boiling in Evelyn, something she wasn't ready to speak aloud. One night, as they sat by the fire pit, he asked, "You think it was him?" Evelyn didn't look up. "I think he's capable of it, but I don't want to believe it," her voice cracked. "Because if it's true, it means I was never his daughter, just his pawn." Noah pulled her close. "Let's find the truth, not the fear." Evelyn clung to him. For once, letting herself be held without apology. The fire had taken Vine's wood, legacy, but not love, not yet. The next morning, Malcolm arrived unannounced. "I did some digging," he said. There was a large wire transfer from one of Richard's shell companies to a private contractor, 2 days before the fire. Evelyn stared at him, fury rising like bile. "He signed my mother's grave and tried to burn mine." Malcolm hesitated. "What will you do?" She didn't answer, just walked outside, where the charred earth still smoked faintly. Noah followed. "Are we going to war?" he asked. Evelyn turned, wind catching her hair like a flame. "No," she said. "We're planting new vines on top of the ashes. And when they grow, they'll remember. And so will he." She spent the day working with the crew to clear the blackened soil. Each handful felt heavier than the last. But she didn't stop. Couldn't. Not now. At sunset, she planted the first new vine herself. No ceremony, just dirt, hope, and defiance. "Let him watch," she whispered. "Let him see I won't burn." In the distance, behind tinted windows, Richard Walker watched from his study. The fire hadn't ended her. It had changed her. And now, he feared her. It arrived in a sealed envelope tucked inside a wine barrel, unmarked, unassuming. Noah had found it during restoration efforts in the old cellar, hidden beneath loose slats. He placed it in Evelyn's hands without a word. Her fingers trembled. As she opened it, the handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, controlled, her mother's. The date at the top chilled her. 2 weeks before Meredith died. Evelyn read it alone, on the edge of the vineyard, where the soil still smelled of ash. The words bled into her soul like slow poison. "If you're reading this," it began, "then I wasn't strong enough to face you with the truth." Evelyn's breath caught. I made choices I can't justify, only explain. Your father wasn't the one who forged the deal with Silas Dorn. I was. The letter unraveled the myth. Meredith had saved the vineyard from collapse by making a deal behind Richard's back. She forged signatures, lied, secured a silent partner who demanded complete discretion. She hadn't done it for legacy. She'd done it for Evelyn. I wanted to leave you something untouched by the darkness we lived in, Meredith wrote. But I failed. Tears blurred the page. Evelyn clutched it like a lifeline and a dagger all at once. Her mother, the one person she trusted blindly, had also manipulated the truth. The betrayal was complex, tangled in love and desperation, and at the end of the letter came the final blow. Noah knows. He's always known. I made him promise never to tell you. Evelyn sat frozen for what felt like hours, her breath shallow, her thoughts louder than any storm. She didn't go back to the house, not immediately. When she finally did, Noah was in the greenhouse, replanting damaged roses. She walked in, the letter crushed in her hand. "You knew," she said quietly. He turned slowly, eyes widening. "I wanted to tell you," he began, stepping forward. She backed away. "But you didn't." Her voice trembled, not with rage, but grief. "You kept it from me. You watched me hate my father, dig through the past, scream for answers, and you said nothing." Noah's jaw tightened. "Because it wasn't my truth to tell. It was hers." "That's not your choice," she snapped. "You were supposed to be the one place I didn't have to question." Silence stretched. The greenhouse felt smaller. Now, tighter. "I kept the promise because she was dying," Noah said, "and because I didn't want to lose you before you were ready to hear it." Evelyn shook her head. "You lost me anyway." She left without another word. That night, she didn't return to the guest house. She slept in the old chapel, curled beneath a worn blanket, the letter folded beside her heart. Her world felt inverted. Meredith was not just a saint, Richard was not just a villain. And Noah had been both protector and accomplice. Flashback, Evelyn at 13, sneaking into the wine cellar. She saw Meredith standing with Noah, both whispering. She thought it was innocent, garden talk. But now, the memory shifted. What if that was the first meeting about the secret? What if everything had started long before she even noticed? In the morning, Rosa found her still at the chapel. "Your mother loved you fiercely," she said, placing warm tea in Evelyn's hands. So fiercely she forgot how to be honest. That's not love's failure. That's a human one. Evelyn nodded slowly. "And Noah?" Rosa sighed. "Sometimes the people who carry our truths carry our burdens too." Later that day, Evelyn returned to the house. Noah was waiting by the porch. He didn't approach, just watched her walk the path. Slowly, like she was measuring every step. When she finally reached him, she handed him the letter. "I hated you for not telling me," she said, "but I hate more the thought of you carrying it alone." Noah looked down. "I'm sorry." She nodded. "So am I." Then she added softly, "I need time." He didn't ask how much. He just said, "I'll be here." And for now, that was enough. It had been 8 days since Evelyn spoke to Noah. Not out of punishment, but preservation. Every time she saw him, on the porch, in the vineyard, in the greenhouse, her heart pulled in 2 directions. One part still loved him. The other wasn't sure how to forgive him. Silence had become her armor again, and she hated how natural it felt. Noah didn't press. He worked longer hours, avoided the porch swing they once shared, and stopped leaving fresh coffee at her door. The absence was its own kind of presence. Evelyn missed him, but she wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, she buried herself in the vineyard's restoration plans, each spreadsheet and blueprint a distraction from what she was truly afraid of. Herself. One afternoon, Evelyn visited Meredith's grave again. The vine she planted was growing, defiantly green. She knelt, fingers brushing the new leaves. "Why didn't you trust me with the truth?" she whispered, but the real question sat heavier. "Why didn't I ask sooner?" The soil didn't answer, but it listened, and that was enough. Later, she found herself watching Noah from the study window. He was fixing the irrigation lines, soaked in sweat and dust. He looked the same, and completely different, vulnerable, wounded, human. She realized then that she had made him her sanctuary, and now blamed him for not being indestructible. Maybe that wasn't fair. That night, thunder rolled over the hills. Evelyn couldn't sleep. Rain battered the windows like a warning. She wandered the halls of the estate, haunted by echoes. In the cellar, she found one of her mother's old sketchbooks. Inside was a drawing of the vineyard, half in bloom, half in decay. A single note at the bottom: "Things can die and still be beautiful." The next morning, Evelyn approached Noah. He was trimming branches near the chapel. She stood silently for a moment before speaking. "I've been unfair," she said. He looked up slowly, uncertain. "You've been hurt," he replied. "That's not the same." She exhaled. "I made you my truth, and when it cracked, I didn't know who. I was without it." Noah stepped back, giving her space to speak freely. "You kept a secret for someone you loved," she continued. "So did I. I hid from myself for years, from what I wanted, from who I could be." He waited. She added, "That's what hurts the most. Not the lie, but the part of me that trusted it blindly." He nodded. "I never wanted to be a crutch." "You weren't," she said. "You were my mirror." They stood in silence, the storm cloud still lingering in the distance. Evelyn took a shaky breath. "Do you still want this? Us?" His eyes searched hers. "Only if it's real, and only if it's honest," she nodded. "Then let's start over." "Here?" he asked. "Now?" She smiled faintly. "No, let's do it right." She pulled out an envelope. Inside, a blank contract. No inheritance, no legacy, just a choice. Noah took it slowly. "You're asking me to choose you?" "No," she said. "I'm asking if we can choose each other, this time for us." They returned to the chapel 2 days later, just the two of them. No rings, no priest, just words. They stood in the doorway as sunlight broke through the stained glass. "I forgive you," Evelyn whispered. "Not because you asked, but because I need to." Noah took her hand. "Then I'll spend my life making sure you never regret it." The wind stirred gently, as if the vineyard itself exhaled. The chapel, once a place of burden, now felt like a beginning. They walked back together, slower this time, no rush, no masks. Evelyn knew they wouldn't be perfect, but for the first time, that didn't scare her. Imperfection was honest, and honesty was love. That evening, Evelyn found herself sketching again. Not plans, not numbers, just Noah, planting vines, his back curved, hands deep in the soil. Below the drawing, she wrote one line: "The man who never stopped rooting for me." She placed it in her journal, closed it, smiled. She was ready for what came next. Because love wasn't about perfect stories. It was about surviving the imperfect storms and choosing to stay. The invitation was simple: parchment, handwritten, tied with a vine. No logos, no signatures, just a date and a place. The chapel at dusk. Evelyn delivered each one herself, not through assistants or mail. She wanted people to feel it. This wasn't a gala. It wasn't a Walker affair. It was something older, something truer, the birth of a second chance. Word spread fast. Some thought it was a wedding. Others thought it was a statement, but no one knew for sure. That was the point. Evelyn didn't care for rumors anymore. Let them talk. Let them wonder. For once, she wasn't controlling the narrative. She was simply inviting them to witness something real. On the day of the ceremony, the sun refused to shine. Clouds rolled in, grey and heavy, but the rain held back, as if even the sky knew not to interfere. Noah wore his simplest shirt, sleeves rolled, soil still under his nails. Evelyn wore no veil, no jewels, just a dress her mother once wore in the vineyard. Soft, linen, earth-toned. Guests gathered outside the chapel, curious, cautious. Richard stood in the back, away from the crowd. He hadn't RSVP'd, Evelyn hadn't asked. But here he was, arms crossed, eyes cold. When she saw him, something inside her stirred. Not fear, not anger, just peace. He was a monument to what she survived, nothing more. Inside the chapel, rows of benches had been cleared. In the center stood 2 small wooden boxes filled with soil, taken from the burned field. Between them, a single young vine, roots exposed. Evelyn and Noah stood beside it. No priest, no speeches, just silence. Until Evelyn stepped forward. She took a deep breath. "We weren't supposed to end up here," she began. "Not together. Not whole, not hopeful." Her voice didn't tremble. "This land gave me everything and took everything, including myself. But now, I'm taking it back." She looked at Noah. "And I'm planting this with the man who never asked for anything, but gave me everything." Noah stepped forward. "I never planned to belong to this world," he said. "But then someone saw me. Not as a worker, not as a pawn, just as me." He paused, eyes on Evelyn. "And that's all I ever needed." Together they lowered the vine into the soil. Side by side, hands deep in earth. Not a performance, a promise. The moment was raw, sacred. Guests didn't applaud. They just stood in silence, as if watching something ancient unfold. Rosa cried quietly. Malcolm Dawn nodded with a strange pride. Even Richard seemed smaller, not broken, but quieter, as if the truth had finally eclipsed his control. After the planting, Evelyn approached Richard. She didn't offer a hug, just stood beside him watching the vine. "You can leave now," she said softly. He looked at her. "You think this proves something?" She shook her head. "It doesn't prove. It roots. That's stronger." He didn't respond, just turned and walked away. That night, the vineyard hosted a simple dinner under the stars. Long tables, local food, laughter without microphones. Evelyn and Noah sat at the center, not as royalty, but as workers of the land, their land. Her legacy was no longer forged by inheritance. It was planted by choice. Later, Noah pulled her aside. "You sure you want this?" he asked. She smiled. "It's not about want, it's about choosing. And I choose this, every day." He kissed her forehead. "Then let's grow it, together." And she nodded. "Let's." They returned to the chapel alone. The vine already looked stronger. Evelyn knelt beside it, fingers brushing the soil. "We're not starting over," she whispered. "We're continuing." Noah knelt beside her, with new roots. She looked at him, her eyes full. "And this time, they're ours." As they walked back under the moonlight, Evelyn felt something lift. Not everything was healed, not everything was fixed, but something had shifted. She no longer felt like a shadow of her mother or a reflection of her father. She felt like Evelyn, whole, imperfect, planted, and for the first time in her life that was more than enough. The letter came a week after the ceremony. No signature, no stamp, just Evelyn's name, written in Richard's familiar, severe script. Inside, one sentence. "If you want to know why I did it, come to the cellar." She stared at the paper for a long time. The cellar, the one place she hadn't stepped into since Meredith died, since the truth came crashing down. Noah watched. "Reed, you don't have to go," he said. Evelyn nodded. "I know." But she also knew that silence, if inherited, became a curse, and she was done with curses. That evening, just before sunset, she descended into the old stone cellar. Dust clung to the air like memory. Richard was already there, waiting, as always. He sat at the old tasting table, a bottle of red wine opened but untouched. Evelyn approached, slowly, her footsteps echoing. He didn't look up. "You used to hide here when your mother and I fought," he said. "She always knew, never said a word." Evelyn sat across from him. "And now? Now I don't have anyone left to lie to," he said quietly. For a moment, they just sat there, two shadows in the family vault. "Why did you do it?" Evelyn finally asked. "The marriage, the fire, the silence?" Richard sighed. "Because I was afraid," he said. "Of what?" "Of watching you become her." Evelyn flinched. "You loved her." "I did," he said, "but she left holes I could never fill." He poured himself a glass, still didn't drink. "She made this vineyard breathe. Without her, I only saw walls closing in. You started walking like her, talking like her. And I panicked. I thought, if I could break you early, you wouldn't disappear like she did." Evelyn shook her head. "You didn't break me. You buried me." Richard looked up. "And you dug yourself out." There was something like pride in his voice, but it came wrapped in sorrow. "I ruined everything trying to preserve it," he admitted. "And now you've built something stronger than I ever could." Evelyn leaned forward. "Then let me do it without your shadow." He nodded slowly. "That's why I called you here." From under the table he pulled a folder. Official, legal, final. "I'm signing it over," he said. "Everything. To the foundation. Not to you, to what you've made." Evelyn took the papers with shaking hands. "Why?" she asked. Richard looked away. "Because I don't want to die owning something I never understood." She didn't cry. Not then, just stood. "You were never the villain I needed to hate," she said. "Just a man too scared to love without conditions." Richard's hands trembled slightly. "And you?" he asked. "What are you now?" Evelyn walked to the door, paused. "Free," she said, "and forgiving." As she left, Richard remained seated, staring into the wineglass he never touched. He didn't call after her, didn't ask for a second chance, and for the first time, that was enough. Evelyn didn't need to win, she just needed to end the war. Outside, the sky was bruised purple and gold. Noah waited under the fig tree. He didn't ask what happened, just opened his arms. Evelyn stepped into them, heart full but unburdened. "It's done," she whispered. "All of it." He kissed her forehead. "Then let's never speak in silence again." That night, Evelyn lit a fire in the garden. She burned the letter, the contract, even an old photograph of the three of them, her, Meredith, Richard. She didn't do it in anger. She did it to let go, of control, of perfection, of grief, disguised as legacy. The ashes drifted over the vineyard like a benediction. Somewhere between destruction and rebirth, Evelyn Walker had become someone new. Not her mother, not her father, herself. And for the first time, her name didn't feel like a prison. It felt like soil. Harvest season arrived earlier than expected. The air grew sweeter, the soil softer. Vines hung heavy with fruit, almost defiant in their abundance. It was as if the land had finally exhaled. Workers moved with purpose. Laughter returned to the fields. Evelyn stood at the edge, a clipboard in one hand, dirt on the other. She smiled, not out of pride, out of gratitude. Noah coordinated the teams, like he'd done for years, except now people listened differently, with respect, with trust. No longer the gardener who married the heiress, he had become something else. A bridge between worlds. Evelyn watched him laugh with the crew, sleeves rolled, skin bronzed by sun. He looked like the future, and for once so did she. Rosa returned to cooking full-time in the estate kitchen. Her empanadas were legendary again. The vineyard launched a scholarship in Meredith's name. Local students applied. Workers' children dreamed higher. Evelyn read every application. She cried over some, laughed over others. But mostly, she felt what she'd long forgotten, purpose that didn't depend on perfection. One afternoon, Noah surprised her with a picnic near the West greenhouse. Wine, bread, honey. "It's not fancy," he said. "It's real," she replied. They ate in silence, legs tangled, the sun warm on their backs. "You ever think we'd get here?" she asked. "Not in this life," he said. She laughed. "Good thing we were wrong." A week later, the first batch of the new vintage was bottled. Evelyn held one up, tracing the label with her finger. Rooted Year 1. The name had come to her in a dream. It wasn't about wine. It was about beginnings, about everything they'd had to bury to bloom. She toasted with Noah that night, barefoot in the cellar. It tasted like freedom. The vineyard threw a community celebration. Lanterns lined the paths. Local musicians played. Children ran through the fields. Evelyn danced with Noah under string lights, her laughter echoing off. The barrels. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't elite. It was honest. And the vineyard, once a monument to expectation, had become a home. In the middle of the festivities, Evelyn was pulled aside by a young girl named Maribel. "You're the owner, right?" the girl asked. Evelyn knelt. "Something like that." Maribel smiled. "Then you're the one who made it okay for girls to run barefoot." Evelyn's throat tightened. She looked down at her own feet, bare, dust-covered. "Yeah," she whispered. "I guess I am." Later that night, Evelyn and Noah sat on the chapel steps, watching the stars emerge one by one. "This feels like a lullaby," she said, "the kind you didn't know you needed until it quiets everything." Noah leaned his head on hers. "We earned this quiet." She nodded. "But do you ever wonder, what's next?" He turned. To her, serious now. "Next, we stop looking back." She looked up. "And if the past follows us..." He kissed her cheek. "Then we walk faster." They both laughed. The kind of laugh that only happens when you're no longer running. At dawn, Evelyn walked the rows alone. She touched every vine, whispered to the leaves, not for magic, but for remembrance. "Thank you," she said to each one, "for surviving with me." The sun rose slowly, painting the fields gold. It felt like the world was bowing to something it couldn't explain. Later that day, Malcolm Dawn visited. He brought paperwork. "It's done," he said. "The foundation owns the land now, entirely." Evelyn signed without hesitation. "Let the past collect dust," she said. Malcolm smiled. "You ever think of going national?" She shook her head. "Roots before wings." In the evening, Evelyn and Noah stood at the first vine they planted together, the one from the root ceremony. It was taller now, stronger, like them. They added a plaque beneath it. "Planted in ashes, grown in truth." Noah traced the words with his finger. "Think people will understand." Evelyn smiled. "They don't have to. We do." As the stars returned and the vineyard quieted, Evelyn rested her head on Noah's shoulder. "I never wanted to be perfect," she said. "Just whole." He whispered, "You are, and so are we." And for one perfect moment, the past didn't matter. Only the harvest in her hands, and the man who helped her grow it. 1 year later, the vineyard stood taller, stronger, wiser. It hadn't just healed, it had evolved. What once felt like a stage for grief and rebellion was now a living rhythm of growth. New workers had come, old ones had stayed, but what mattered most was the atmosphere. There was laughter in the soil, hope in the vines. Evelyn walked the rows with a quiet confidence now. She no longer needed to prove anything to herself, to Richard, to the world. The land no longer demanded perfection, it demanded presence, and she had learned how to give that, with her hands, with her heart, with her choices, and most of all, with her silence. Noah had started a school near the edge of the estate. He taught kids how to grow food, how to care for the earth, how to listen more than they spoke. He called it the Garden of Second Chances. When he explained it to people, he always smiled and said, "Some things grow better when they're left to breathe." Evelyn visited often, watched children laugh as they dug into soil without fear of failure. One afternoon she watched a girl plant a sprout upside down. Another child corrected her. The girl shrugged and said, "Maybe it grows better this way." Evelyn smiled. There it was, the spirit of the vineyard, alive and unafraid of imperfection. Richard never returned. Not to the house, not to the vineyard. But Evelyn received a small box on her birthday, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside Meredith's locket, and a note written in her father's uneven hand. "Your mother's courage, your fire. I never knew how to hold either, but I see it now. Thank you for continuing." Evelyn didn't cry. She just held the locket and whispered, "Goodbye." The foundation grew. Workers received full health care. Young winemakers received grants. Local women opened shops on vineyard-owned land, rent-free. The estate became more than a business. It became a movement. And though it bore the Walker name, it no longer belonged to history. It belonged to the present, and the hands that shaped it. One evening, as the sun melted behind the hills, Evelyn stood by the root ceremony vine. It now climbed waist-high, curled toward the sky, like it knew something sacred. Noah joined her, a glass of their first full vintage in hand. "You ever think about what might have happened if we hadn't been forced together?" he asked. Evelyn looked at him. Sometimes, but not with regret. They toasted in silence, to what was, to what never came, to what survived anyway. And in that moment, it didn't matter how the story began. Only that it had found its way here. To peace, to purpose, to presence. They didn't need a title, didn't need to start over. They just needed to continue. That fall, Evelyn wrote her first book. Not a memoir, not about trauma, but about the language of soil, how the ground speaks in wounds and recovery. She titled it Things That Grow. In ashes, on the dedication page, one line, "For Meredith, for the gardener who stayed, for the girl I found beneath the fire." During the book launch, a woman in the audience asked, "If you could change one thing, what would it be?" Evelyn paused, looked at Noah, then at the crowd. "Nothing," she said, "because if I changed anything, I might have missed this version of myself. And I finally like her." The room applauded, but more than that, they understood. That night, Evelyn and Noah walked the vineyard one last time before winter pruning. Snow hadn't yet fallen, but the air smelled of sleep, nature preparing to pause. "You think it'll come back stronger in spring?" she asked. Noah nodded. "It always does, as long as the roots stay." She smiled. "Then we're safe." At the edge of the vineyard, they planted one last vine, not for legacy, not for business, but for their child, due in 6 months. Evelyn knelt beside the soil, hands over her belly. "This is yours," she whispered. "Not the past, not the name, just this moment, just this earth." Noah placed a small wooden sign beside the vine. Season 1, begin again. And as they walked back home, hand in hand, the vineyard behind them didn't just whisper, it sang. If you've made it this far, let us know what you thought about the story. And if you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe to catch all our upcoming stories.